war in human history, the U.S. rose to power as the global leader.
The American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory.
And as
That
that
300
the
lang
U.S.
ang
created new
dexter.
structures like NATO and the World Trade Organization. They established rules about trade, rules about economics, rules about justice, rules that they based on Western philosophical values, now being projected around the globe by a country with an astounding amount of alliances and military power. For a time, another great empire challenged that order, operating with a different set of rules, a different set of values and philosophies, trading with their own bloc and working with their own alliances. But it couldn't last. The collapse of the Soviet Union in the 90s left the US and their rich allies as the sole setters of the rules, the holders of the power. So the US doubled down, and their system of liberal values, democracy, and free trade spread and fortified throughout the world. But when you're the global leader, when you're the one who sets all the rules, you get to decide when you follow your own rules, and when you don't. Being the global superpower has turned more into being the global policeman. Over these last 75 years, the US has been known to violate the values, norms, and ideals that it built the whole global system off of. Cozying up to strongman dictators, throwing out democratically elected governments, fueling regional wars, and generally trying to stamp out communism across the globe. And anyone who didn't want to play by America's rules was cast out as an insane pariah in need of regime change.
The Iraqi regime has plotted to develop anthrax and nerve gas and nuclear weapons for over a decade.
And yet, despite this double game the U.S. has played, this system has been a part of the most peaceful period of human history. Major empires don't fight each other like they used to. And a major reason is because they came to understand that getting in line with the American-led system would mean economic opportunity and growth. It wasn't worth a war. Fighting against this system often meant destruction and losing deals for all sides. This peace was also helped by the existence of the most powerful weapons ever invented, which great powers didn't dare use on each other. The American-led system has meant stability and an incredible amount of trade, leading to a dramatic reduction in global poverty. But that era is coming to an end.
Hey, it's me, not in the VO booth here on camera, so I can just tell you about something. I'm not sure if you've heard, but the goal of this channel is kind of developing, let's say. We want to become the place for rigorous independent journalism on the internet and on YouTube. And we're doing that, not just here on the channel, but we just launched a new channel called Search Party with my old Vox colleague, Sam Ellis. It's live now. If you're looking for ways to support this journalism and get something in return, I've got a fun one for you. Consider subscribing to Nebula. Nebula is a creator-owned streaming service where we publish all of our videos a week early and ad-free. You pay a few bucks a month or a yearly subscription for a discount, and a portion of that subscription goes directly to supporting our next journalistic project. But that only happens if you sign up with the link in my description, which is nebula.tv/Johnny Harris. Apparently people actually aren't clicking the link, they're just opening a new tab and typing in nebula.tv and signing up and missing out on a discount as well as supporting us. Please don't do that. But signing up for Nebula isn't just about supporting independent journalism and getting my videos a week early and ad-free. It's also the home of super premium content that you can't get anywhere else. Like I've been watching this excellent series lately by Greenland called Battle Report. It's full of all of this stunning animation and compelling storytelling about the engineering and technology and British military aircraft in the series. Really good stuff. Or you can recommend a reflection to shoot about the world of logistics.
Uy, gago, kamatinan na.
But you actually do because it's fascinating, and of course one of my all-time favorites, Real Life War has a series on modern
Sa man, di
conflicts that
magkapa
beautifully
sa
teaches
link.
you about the military strategies and developments in a bunch of conflicts around the world. If you need to take a break from all of the learning on Nebula, check out Jetlag. Jetlag is this great challenge game show that takes place around the world. Not totally sure how they pull this off, but it's incredibly entertaining and a nice entertainment break from all of the super rigorous teaching and learning that you get on Nebula. There's so much good stuff on this platform that is not driven by algorithms and advertisements, but is driven by subscribers and creators who are talking to each other through hyper quality premium content. I'm super into it, and it's just a few bucks a month. You get a discount if you go to nebula.tv/JohnnyHarris, and once again, if you do that, a portion of your subscription every month or your yearly subscription goes directly to fund our journalism projects. So please consider subscribing if that is interesting to you. You can try it out, cancel anytime. For those who sign up, I will see you a week early and ad-free on all of my videos. And for the rest of you, let us dive back into the globe. In part thanks to the US-led order, China, which until recently was the most populous country on Earth, has risen to become the second largest economy and world's largest military based on active forces. And more, China sees the US as an unfair policeman of the global order, only holding to the rules that benefit them. And this projection of values and philosophies from the West to the leaders in China, this looks a lot like the modern-day version of colonialism. They see this hypocritical American empire, drunk on power that they've had since 1945, an America that is increasingly defensive because it's in decline, with its broken politics, divided people, and a complacency with their spot at the top. So China is building a competing system. In March 2023, Chinese leader Xi Jinping announced his Global Civilization Initiative, where he stated that countries must, quote, refrain from imposing their own values or morals on others, and refrain from stoking ideological confrontation. So instead of the hypocritical colonialism of the U.S. imposing its human rights and democracy around the world, his system was much more action, stripping away the veil of what he views as a hypocritical, rules-based order that is built to basically benefit one group. The Chinese system is built on common interests, beneficial deals, and opportunistic alliances, not supported for ethical values. And unlike decades past, China now has the military and money to make it happen, to ignore the rules of the global superpower and to make their own, to engage with the world in a different way, to pursue Chinese interests outside of the system. And so now you see a competition between these two great powers that have become deeply economically entwined over the last 50 years. And now they're slowly decoupling. And around the world, you see China planting seeds for its new system, using state-backed money to invest in infrastructure projects all over the globe. This gives China a presence in many new countries, tying these countries to Chinese debt, which often translates into future leverage. In March 2023, China sent diplomats to the Middle East for the first major effort to broker a peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. This is something that the U.S. couldn't do, and it showed the declining influence that the U.S. has in this region. But the U.S. still remains on, and they will as long as they can control the economic and financial systems of the world, which they do. China is challenging this as well, working with Brazil, Russia, India, and South Africa, or the BRICS countries, to develop an alternative economic bloc. These are all major growing economies, and they will only become more important in the next 2 decades. Since 2009, the BRICS countries have been stepping up their cooperation, meeting annually, creating a new development base to invest in their countries, and coordinating their various policies. The BRICS countries are becoming a potential rival to the G7 countries, which represent the US order. BRICS countries are even discussing creating a hard currency that will share between 5 growing economies.
They're creating a secondary economy in the world, totally independent of the United States. We won't have to talk about sanctions in 5 years because there'll be so many countries transacting in currencies other than the dollar that we won't have the ability to sanction them.
This would be a major challenge to the US dollar, which is currently the standard for international trade, and a major reason why everyone has dependence with the US. Russia's invasion of Ukraine was a major pushback against the Western security and economic order, and it showed us which countries would fall on which side of the bucket. You can see that most countries aren't taking sides here. They aren't siding with Russia, China, or the Western bloc. You could call these the non-aligned countries, the undecided, the countries that choose and
will be looking to influence their system. Let's highlight the 25 largest economies in non-aligned countries, at least according to the Economic Intelligence Unit. These are the economies that the U.S. is working to keep on their system, and that China is trying to woo to join their new transaction system. But this Cold War is different than the one where the USA and the Soviet Union forced countries to deeply choose a side based on ideological convictions about capitalism versus communism. This new rising Cold War could be much less black and white. Instead, in this much more globalized and interconnected world, the online countries will exploit this bidding war between the superpowers to get them the best trade and security deal possible. Like in Brazil, where this is already happening. Brazil is a massive country with a super close ally, and yet they're a part of the BRICS bloc with China, which is one reason Brazil refused to sell weapons to Ukraine when the country requested a deal. They're already walking this line between their interests in aligning with the U.S. order and their interests in aligning with China. Brazil's president traveled to Beijing in April 2023, and not only did the Brazilian president sign around 20 new agreements on technology, trade, and agriculture, but he actually asked Beijing to help him negotiate the war in Ukraine. So even as the U.S. is trying to cut ties, Brazil is showing that they're not going to take a step back. They're going to fight for the war. India is getting lots of cheap oil and nearly half of their weapons from Russia, and then getting a quarter of their weapons from Europe, and recently securing $200 billion in funding from the U.S. for Indian technology. Saudi Arabia gets almost all of its weapons from the United States, but it's turning away from the U.S. in other ways, like trade, where China is now their top trading partner. In late 2022, China and Saudi Arabia signed a strategic partnership agreement, meaning that their leaders will be meeting more frequently. There will be more trade, more technology transfer, and more diplomacy. Turkey is a member of NATO, and generally a member of the West, but also has to work with alignment because it has strong economic ties to Russia. Turkey also doesn't want to move out from China's economic expansion. China has a Belt and Road Initiative that runs right through Turkey, and they're hoping to force more Chinese investment in transportation, energy, and energy. Pakistan is a country that has been aligned with the U.S. in recent years, and a partner on the Women's Front, that will also entertain investment and trade with China, including a $62 billion investment in China's Belt and Road Initiative to create this economic corridor between the two countries. The continent of Africa is full of mostly non-violent countries. It's also where China has been busy giving huge loans and building bridges, ports, mines, and railways, all with the goal of filling those countries with future Chinese oil needs. And China is expanding trade here too, trading $254 billion with Africa in 2021, while the U.S. only traded $34 billion, a sixth beyond China. China's investment has been swift and effective here and all over the world in garnering new friends and allies, laying the foundation for the competing world order. But the U.S. isn't just going to sit back and watch. They're already ready. Big names like Kamala Harris, Janet Yellen, the President of the World, Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, helped over Africa. President Biden went to Saudi Arabia last year, despite calling countries support Soraya state on the campaign. He was there to try to claw back some influence that was being taken by China. And then, of course, the U.S. is hitting China straight up, cutting them off from Western technology to further their economic and military power. The U.S. and its allies in Asia are also encircling China with their military in the Pacific, sending billions of dollars of weapons and infrastructure into China's backyard. So, it looks like we're in the early days of a new multipolar world. The competition between a great superpower and a rising superpower wants to lead a new system based on different values. The result is likely the undoing of a lot of the globalization and interconnectedness that has developed in the last 7 years. And for now, I think what we'll see is countries won't be choosing a side hastily. Instead, they'll play both of these great powers together to get the best deal for their country. I'm not sure how long we'll be able to do this as tensions rise and the pressure mounts to choose a side. But for now, what's clear is that we're moving into uncomfortable waters.
400 kilometers towards Earth. No explosive, just speed.
Things like rods from God, which is dropping big tungsten rods from space, having them fall very quickly.
Mach 24 at first, but the atmosphere eventually slows it down to Mach 8. It's still going super fast, till it reaches the surface of the Earth. Another satellite waits in orbit for years, and then when given the command, it releases a capsule.
A re-entry capsule with hundreds of drones, thousands of drones. You can put it anywhere you want within a matter of minutes.
Here's a caravan of a dozen satellites. They've got small missiles inside, and they're just waiting till the military commander on Earth gives them the order to go hit a group of enemy satellites, knocking out the vital communication and navigation capabilities of the enemy. These aren't sci-fi scenarios. These are real projects that militaries are working on, powerful militaries. They've been thinking about these things for years, but we're in a new era of space. It's a lot easier to get up here. And so, as happens, countries want to control it.
Now we're getting to the point where these crazy ideas that people would have said were science fiction are becoming more possible, and we should be looking at all these things on the horizon. Advances in space happen very rapidly.
The new military space race is really between the US, China, and Russia, though less and less Russia. This is really a rivalry between the United States and China. Both countries have a relatively new wing of their military dedicated to controlling, defending, and preparing for combat in space, or, in the words of the US Space Force, to fundamentally transform our approach to space from a combat support function to a warfighting domain. And it's getting crowded. Lots and lots of satellites are going up there. There are over 12,000 floating on the Earth right now. Oh, and by the way, I've always had a little trouble with these visuals of like all the dots that are satellites. This is not to scale. These satellites are not like right next to bumping into each other. But the fact remains, there's a lot of high-tech stuff floating around our Earth, and more of that is dedicated to military purposes. It's become a vital tool of modern warfare, and that is what this video is about. It's about these devices, satellites, that not only let planes and troops navigate and communicate, but also scan the world looking for missile launches. They reveal secrets, looking through clouds, and at night to capture underground submarine headquarters, deep-sea cable cutters, North Korean warships. I'm going to show you how militaries are working on technology that they could potentially use to attack the satellites of their enemy with grappling hooks, with lasers, with a nuclear bomb. I've been talking to experts, including one that you'll hear a lot from in this video, as I set out to understand war in space. This escalating race to control and dominate a domain shrouded in mystery, one that is hard to police. And it's all happening right at a time when we're entering into an era of global rivalries. They're heating up again. All while the most powerful people on Earth have a deeper and deeper interest in what happens in this space far above our heads. It's space. It's the final frontier. And it's time we start paying attention. Okay, first we gotta talk about satellites. These little computers bolted to a metal frame that are orbiting around a plane.
Some are very small. Some might be a version of CubeSat. So a CubeSat is something really small. You can fit it in your hand.
Dr. Clayton Swope, who's an expert on space policy here at a think tank in DC called CSIS.
It could be the size of a refrigerator in a college dorm room. But then you have others that could be the size of a bus. So solar panels will be a lot bigger than the satellites. So think about it, you're just moving your arms out usually, and that's how the satellite looks with solar panels.
Some of these satellites are way far out in this orbit called geostationary orbit. They're a tenth of the way to the moon. And they're moving at the same speed as Earth. So if you were to look at them in the night sky, they would just kind of look like a star. They stay in one place. But most satellites these days are here in this sweet spot of low Earth orbit, about 400 to 800 kilometers above our heads. And look, there's the International Space Station hurling around the Earth. This one's obviously a lot bigger than a refrigerator. And a reminder of something that may be obvious to some of you, but was kind of fuzzy in my head, and now it's not, which is that these satellites are not like zooming around the Earth with jet engines. They are actually kind of falling. When a rocket launches a satellite into space, it goes upwards for a few kilometers, but then it starts to go sideways. And in fact, most of the energy being blasted out of this rocket is being used to move it, let's say, horizontally, getting close to 30,000 kilometers an hour.
You're trying to outrace gravity.
Once you're moving that fast, you can cut the engines because you're at this magical speed where you keep missing the Earth.
So you're trying to move so fast that while gravity's pulling you in, that you are effectively staying in an orbit around the Earth. So you're trying to defeat gravity.
So people who are floating in the International Space Station are not floating because they're not in Earth's gravity. They're floating because they've kind of reached this perfect equilibrium of speed and gravity that makes them constantly falling. So before we get to all the war and defense stuff, let's just take a moment and appreciate this magical thing we've invented called putting things into orbit around our Earth. These days, a lot of these satellites are talking to one another, forming a constellation where they can send signals between each other, all to serve a variety of purposes, like helping guide ships and airplanes, tracking pollution, or running scientific analysis on stars. Starlink has around 7,000 of these satellites in a big constellation that provides internet access to remote areas that were very disconnected before, and to those fighting in the war in Ukraine. There's one satellite constellation that I use more than any other, and it looks like this. This is a very special constellation.
The biggest thing that we take for granted is the global positioning system, the GPS.
Around 30 satellites that are flying 20,000 kilometers above us, run by the American government. At any given time, anywhere on Earth, 3 of these satellites can see us, and this signal allows them to provide a very accurate location of where we are on Earth. If you lock onto 4 satellites, you can even get your elevation, and this is magic. Not to mention, it's all delivered to me on an easy-to-use software like Google Maps that allows me to navigate anywhere in the world. By the way, Russia has their own GPS constellation, so does China and the EU. My other big use case for this is something you've seen me do a lot on this. This incredibly timeless photos that we take from space and stitch together to create something like Google Earth. I spent hundreds on Google Earth and then just designs and then it's work. And I gotta say, it's another good place for me. And it works because a bunch of these satellites have serious advantage. You take high definition images of the planet, send them back down to Earth. It's little animation. Oh, and these days it's not just visible. Some satellites send out a pretty long way from microwave radiation, and then record how it bounces back. This allows them to see through things like clouds. It allows them to see elevation, seismic activity, weather patterns, or maybe a secret nuclear submarine base in the mountains of China, a missile production facility in the mountains of Iran. So you see where this is going. But let's remember why these things are put up in space. And the answer is war. Before we talk about the weapons, many countries sponsor use rocket money. Thanks money about rocket money sponsoring. Did we plan? I apparently have been paying triple for a streaming service because I signed up for it with one email, and then I signed in on my TV, and then I signed up for another email, and then apparently my wife signed up for it as well. Anyway, I didn't know this was happening until I started using Rocket Money. They allowed me to quickly catch all of the wasteful spending that is happening behind the scenes for me. Rocket Money is all-in-one financial aid. You download it, you get access to bank accounts, and it goes and it intelligently searches all these transactions and looks for patterns, looks for duplicates,
말만 말고
looks for
빨리
opportunities
어떻게
to
좀 하란
lower
말이에요.
your bills. Like it will go out and negotiate lower bills for you, and cancel these subscriptions, close down the app. All of this in addition to smart tools like being able to create a budget or set savings goals. It gives you a much clearer view of how you can Yep. More insight on my guys. But thank you, Rocket Man, for sponsoring today's video. Let's go back up to space to see what untriggered is there. So the 1960s and 60s were space the US and Soviet Union were racing to put satellites into space, not only to flex on each other scientifically, but also to spy on each other from above. Back then, these satellites would have huge rolls of film on board. Take a bunch of pictures of enemy territory, and then eject the canister of film, which would barrel back down into the atmosphere,
다
and then be
들리거든요.
caught in
꼬마
midair
침입하기 전에
by
잘
like
따라오긴
an
해요.
airplane. brought back to HQ and developed, and boom, you've got a bunch of pictures of Soviet missile sites. Pretty nuts. So this was like the main military application of space. But of course, over the decades,
저쪽으로 한번
militaries
가봐요.
floated some pretty crazy ideas on how to actually militarize space, how to threaten the enemy's satellites. But it was all really difficult and expensive, and eventually the Soviet Union fell, so the threat was like, why are we doing this? But fast forward to today, and two things have happened. The threat is back, and the cost for going to space is
너희들
down. By 2020,
소속,
humanity
뒤쪽에
has
있어요.
3,000 active satellites floating around our planet. And then, right after, yeah, wow. I mean, the graphs says it all. It has become way cheaper to put stuff in space, thanks to the rise of innovative private space companies. I mean, there's so many satellites up there, like some astronomers are complaining that in the night sky, satellites are giving away. And this also comes at a time where global rivalries are heating up since 2019 U.S. Congress passed a law that created the United States Space Force, the newest branch of the U.S. military, officially classifying space as, quote, a war-fighting domain, just like the other domains, air, land, sea, and space. So let's quickly go over how militaries use space together. How space has become so vital to modern warfare, and then how these countries are preparing to fight war in space. So, first up, militaries still use satellites to spy.
So that's so fancy. So that could be taking pictures of things happening on Earth. If we want to know when a missile is fired, we want to see a signal. We want to be able to see a thermal signature. We want to track something. Use it for surveillance, reconnaissance, things like that. People use this imagery to keep an eye on Earth. Like, look at how far satellite imagery has come in space. So the U.S. immediately knows that Russia is moving a bunch of troops to the Ukrainian border like they did in February 2022, right before they invaded. And China and Russia know that the U.S. has recently moved a bunch of troops to the island in the Indian Ocean. The country preparing to bomb Iran? Who knows? But you can't really keep this stuff a secret. Militaries can see each other, and they can see much deeper into each other's world. This is how we know so much about the militarism in North Korea. The notorious closed place. There are people spending all their time looking at messages, spotting things like this concealed submarine. In fact, we're making an entire video explaining what we can learn about North Korea purely from the satellite. That's coming out So, now that it's much cheaper to put in space, you're going to expect to see a lot more of these constellations. More like swarms of satellites that can direct their gaze to anywhere on Earth and monitor it in real time. This is something that is actively being worked on. According to some reporting from Reuters, SpaceX has won the $1.8 billion contract with the National Competition to develop this spy satellite solution. This stuff will be taking so many photos and feeding so much data that no one person or group of people is going to be able to sort of process it, which is a perfect time for artificial intelligence to happen. We made a whole video about how AI is transforming war and how huge amounts of data from all these different sensors can be fed in to
소저가
command
말한
control software
소중한
to give intel and
마주치긴
even
했는데.
target recommendations to
바보.
commanders. So that's a whole other video. Okay, so that's spying and sensing, and that's a huge part of the future of how space will be used by militaries. The other is an early warning system. The US, China, and Russia, and to a limited degree other countries like England and France, have satellites to just keep an eye on the missile sites of their enemies, looking for something like this, a
여기
missile
원리만
being
잔뜩
launched.
들어있다.
These satellites are an early warning system. You can tell the people back on Earth that something's coming their way, so that they
아무래도
can
여기
shoot
넘는
it
것
down
같은데.
before it gets too close. Now, quick accuracy caveat here. We've had this tech for a really long time, but it's kind of outdated, and it doesn't have the capability to
실망하지.
like hypersonic missiles
근데
and all of
친구가
these things.
담비밖에
The US has
없어요.
this space
어머,
development
남의
agency
사정도
that just sent
모르면서
a new generation of
몰라도 돼요.
satellites with the vision of creating a big constellation of hundreds of small satellites that surround the globe in low Earth orbit and constantly monitor for the heat signature of a missile launch.
The third thing is GPS, the ability to know where you are and to have a way to not have to use a map and compass when you navigate.
And then, of course, there's potentially the most valuable thing for any military, which is just communication.
So we want to be able to use space to talk to each other.
So you can see that space for these space-faring militaries is like a nervous system, an invisible nervous system that gives militaries the ability to see the whole world, to sense it, to communicate between it, and to make decisions. It's a really powerful capability. If your enemy is not Star Wars, where we're going around and shooting it, it's kind of like if there was a bunch of cars driving around a racetrack. If you want to attack another one, you kind of have to drive up to it and attack it while you're going. And put that in 3 dimensions and make it space, and suddenly you've got satellite orbital attack.
You can maneuver in space, it just doesn't look like airplanes flying in the air.
So now we're seeing big military capabilities to maneuver this from one sophisticated to the other.
They can put satellite in the view system, or what's called SG-21.
It's apparently tasked with cleaning up space junk. So in January
소전은
2022,
피했어요.
this Chinese satellite starts to break from just the boring old orbit and starts producing further stuff. It goes 3,000 kilometers up and down from the orbit to keep up with one of China's dead satellites, and they grab onto it with a kind of like crackling hook robotic arm thing. They get back in the orbit with the track in hand, and they eventually push it out into what's called collision. And we're looking at this from simple as if we got looking it up and you grab it and it's no, this is insane with the physics and the maneuvering of fuel.
And demonstrating, say, the ability to do very sophisticated maneuvers, but no one's done that. Those types of capabilities are set up to serve a military purpose. The ability to grab onto a satellite and use it.
One of the big sports is Pentagon. China practicing dogfighting in space. Dogfighting means chase each other, shoot each other down.
Procedures to do on-orbit space operations from one satellite to another.
So why would they do that? It's hard to say what the messaging is of that, but it does show that they're operating in an increasingly sophisticated way. With the satellites, around their own satellites, it's still concerning. And then two, they just don't seem to care as much about fuel use as we historically have.
Being able to precisely maneuver to another satellite while you're in orbit doesn't just allow you to grab onto it with this claw machine looking thing. You can also do some other clever military
눈썰미가
things. For
좋네요.
example, Chinese military researchers published a paper specking out a concept for a satellite bomb that you could theoretically deliver into the exhaust pipe of a satellite in orbit and just have it sit there. Really thinking about this stuff. Now, making it sound like China's the only one who has the ability to maneuver. That's not true. The US can do it, and so can Russia even. And in fact, last year, multiple Russian satellites got close to an American-sized satellite and kind of surrounded it. The US complained and the military stopped, but there was movement happening in space. And these Russian satellites having this thing shooting something off, they really shoot it in the satellite that shot off into space. Russia says this is perfectly peaceful, but
You feel like a projectile from Russian satellites. What is that test? Is that a test of that satellite weapons? So effectively a projectile that could shoot from one satellite to another? Is it indicative of some other type of testing? We really don't know. I'm suspicious of anything Russia would be doing like that. So I'm thinking weapons. And even if that's not the intention, I'm still thinking weapons services.
a lot of these things look like civilian operations that can be used for kind of civilian purposes, but if things got real down here on Earth, those same capabilities could be flipped to be used as attacking weapons from one side to the other. But the U.S. has not acknowledged whether or not they have developed have come out and said that they could develop these types of weapons if they wanted to, but they don't acknowledge any programs with co-orbital anti-satellite weapons. But knowing what we know about this stuff, we can assume, or at least I assume, that the U.S. probably has a really sophisticated capacity for satellite and satellite attacks. We don't know about it. One thing we do know about, kind of, is this thing. I mean, this thing looks like a little mini space shuttle thing. Much to my disappointment, this thing is not just zipping around in space like in Star Wars. It is microwave, and once again, lasers. Space Wars. So the U.S. space plane spent their 4,000 days worth of experimenting in space, much of it very confidential. China's also got this sort of space drone that they're doing similar stuff with. And let me just pause and remind you that a lot of this stuff that we're doing now was thought up decades ago. During the Cold War, people were thinking of crazy ideas. There was actually a program that was nicknamed Star Wars. Rods from God, the scene that started the video with the rods going down to Earth, like that was thought up during the Cold War. A lot of this stuff was like conceived during that time. It was too expensive and impractical, but they were thinking of this stuff. One of the programs during that time was really clever, and it was a missile suspender shield and those satellites were going around Earth waiting and waiting and waiting. And the moment that your enemy like launches a rocket towards you, these satellites go down and shoot the rocket down on you. Brilliant. Incredibly expensive and complicated. But guess what? A couple months ago, Donald Trump took office, Elon Musk by his side, and guess what's back on the agenda? Rolling Pebbles, now rebranded as America's Iron Dome, aka Golden Dome Missile Defense Shield. And, not surprisingly, Elon Musk is the frontrunner to build the Golden Dome rocket shield. Yes. Right now there are no active weapons like blow things up with. As we go forward, there will be missiles in space that, again, are there for defense. That could easily be turned into a display and be turned into a weapon to take out another side. And then there's nukes. So, back in the Cold War, there was talk of putting a nuclear weapon in orbit and just having it there.
I guess the crazy idea was like, are people going to have weapon stations in space that you drop on Earth?
But this was the Cold War. Crazy ideas were the name of the game. Soviet Union and the United States both put nukes super high up in the atmosphere and detonated them just to see what would happen while testing this idea out. And sure enough, it completely obliterated a huge portion of the satellites that were going around Earth at the time. There weren't a ton back then, but it did some real damage. Not because of an explosion, but because of an electromagnetic pulse, radiation that goes in and kind of messes with the electronics of these orbiting satellites. So not good. And in fact, so not good that the Soviet Union and the United States decided to sign an agreement where they say, we promise not to do any nukes or weapons of mass destruction into space. So at least from orbit. We still send ICBMs with nuclear warheads into space, so they go down, but having them in orbit all the time,
제자가 사부를 구하러 가다니
they do.
무슨 사부가 그래?
말
We are
조심하십시오.
taking the
각자
first firm step toward keeping outer space free forever from the implements of war.
And that's been kind of our one big treaty in governing weapons in outer space. We don't really have an international framework around this.
소소.
In fact, that very
위험해
treaty
보이네.
is now being tested.
Russia is developing a nuclear weapon in space.
In a big block of its US intel has said that Russia actually has the capability to put a nuke in space. And for a hot minute, there were people saying that there is a nuclear weapon in orbit that Russia has launched.
Since Russia was put a nuclear device in orbit,
Big freak out, super scary. Turns out there wasn't a nuclear weapon in space, but there was a weird Russian satellite that was in graveyard orbit, but it was active. It was kind of a little stuff. And the U.S. military insisted that this was and is a part of a program that Russia has to
역시
eventually put a
소엽이라면
nuclear warhead
이쯤은
in
문제
orbit.
없을 줄
Some type
알았어요.
of anti-satellite nuclear capability, nuclear weapon that would be based in space. That's what the allegation is.
Space, which would be an indiscriminate weapon, doesn't have national boundaries, doesn't determine between military satellites, civilian satellites, or commercial satellites.
And how do we know that they have this?
And here's where you have me, again, at a disadvantage. I'd be happy to have this conversation in a classified session.
So we don't know.
We are concerned about it, the department and the entire administration, and I know this Congress is taking this deadly seriously.
So you say, oh wow, would Russia really do that? I think what has happened though is that Russia is the declining space power. They're driving around a 1989 Buick. It's still working. It's
저쪽으로
reliable.
가야 하는데
Testament to Soviet engineers. The systems work as well as they do. They're not launching new stuff. They're not making new technologies.
이
Russia
조건이요.
flatly denies that they're doing this. And in fact, Putin has come out and said he doesn't want an own space. And of course he doesn't. Russia has a plan of space power. But he's framing it as this moralistic argument of saying we don't want an own space. But the US is like, no, Putin, we see you're developing a nuclear weapon to protect space to get the ultimate leverage over the rest of us because we're the surpassing you. So the next month, everyone at the UN, the UN Security Council, and the UN, with Japan, puts out this resolution that says, why don't we all sign a promise that we will reaffirm that treaties with no WMD in space. Everyone wants to reaffirm it. And guess what? Russia vetoes the resolution. And boom, the US is like, gotcha. We know that you're actually not serious about this. You want to put a nuke in space. Why didn't you sign this resolution?
Why, if you are following the rules, would you not support a resolution that reaffirms them? What could you possibly be hiding?
But then, in a kind of wild defensive gambit in geopolitics, Russia got their own resolution that says we will actually ban all weapons in space, quote, for all time. So like, we don't want to just reaffirm the old treaties. We want to ban all weapons in space. Stop all times. And guess what? The US. And now Russia is like, you are the one who wants to weaponize space. We said we want to every single time and you do it. I'm painting this picture because I want you to see that there is a constant negotiation about where do we do this resolution? Where do we take the break? And so far the countries can't quite agree. And so the status quo, it being the Wild West of things, continues. And boy do I hope that changes soon. Because in my opinion, there is no reason why we can't start Korea. It's space. It's not land and territory and borders and ethnic identities or language. It is space. And it is my hope that even though space is going to become bigger and more crowded and more place, these countries can figure out a way to talk to each other and put out some break on how far they're willing to go to weaponize it. Because weaponizing it doesn't actually work. So until these countries come to the table and actually agree on something, it's going to continue. China will continue to catch up to the US and Elon Musk will continue to get very rich. The US will forge ahead with all of its secretive capabilities that they learn about. And space, up there, with all those satellites, will certainly be a big part of anything. I've been sleeping every night in the desert. Up here in the northwest corner of Saudi Arabia. It's quiet up here. All you can hear is the wind and the sand with softness in its dunes. Not far from where I sleep, there is a new one.
whole mountain. I'm joined by my friend Solomon, who is born in the desert. He knows this desert better than anyone. Every dune, every valley. All the secret water spots hidden deep in red rocks of Solomon to Helena and Cleveland. We're going to get up close on the construction of New England. But also to show me how people live out here, to introduce me to members of his tribe, how they've survived for centuries. A nomadic Bedouin who represent the origin story of this desert kingdom. I wanted to put a human face to this collision of worlds, old and new. I believe this little shape on the map represents the
시기도
story of
불구하고
Saudi
광물
Arabia,
틈새를 살펴야겠소.
where it came from, how it got here, and why it is attempting to build these cities in the sand.
I'm officially in Neom, and let me tell you what I'm seeing so far. Trucks, dump trucks, cargo trucks, trucks carrying excavators, trucks carrying more trucks. I've never seen so many trucks in my entire life. Oh, and these roads, a lot of them are brand new. A lot of them don't even show up on Google Maps. Like, I'm looking at my phone and I'm just sort of floating in no man's land because these are all brand new roads. This is new. Everything is popping up so quickly. There's so many trucks.
All of a sudden, Solomon turned off one of these seemingly new roads.
Why do you just load the tires up? Into the desert.
Wow, this car can go everywhere. Are we going up this dune? Oh. We found a little canyon to camp in. You know, I thought we'd be eating granola bars or canned soup. Solomon had other plans. Rice and candy. The Indian tradition here is to wind down with a cup of coffee. Saudi coffee is green, infused with still very Oh, and then to the coffee comes, which again is very delicious, but how can they drink so much coffee before bed?
Yeah, I can't drink too much because they get caffeine and won't go to sleep. In the morning, I drink a lot.
필요한 것을 모두 구했다.
Wow. Close. So until what age did you live in the desert?
Maybe until 7.
So 7.
Yeah.
Do you like it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they have to find families. Real families.
Yeah.
The people that are going through, they are real. So, when we moved to the city, I studied. I go back.
Oh, you go back to the desert?
Even for me, I like to have a job in the city, but I was evidence.
재료는 이 정도면 가다 보면
소저 이름을
Soon we'll meet the
알려주겠어요.
Bedouin nomads who sleep under these stars
이제
every night.
우리 친구인 거죠? 그럼 소사매라고 불러도 좋아요.
Incredible stars.
우리 다음엔
꼭 다시 만납시다. 소사매.
네, 소영.
The Saudi desert is proving to be exceptionally peaceful.
드디어 대중소 형님이 서로 화해를
By the way,
했다.
are still working here in the dead of night.
해봤자 또 싸워. 싸우면
They
우리
don't ever stop, and haven't for years.
오마들이 봄을 여실 강남.
It is so silent here. My brain doesn't know what to do about it. So silent.
As the sun rises and the solemn sleepy gaze something coffee, so important to achieve. I'm thinking about my mission for today. My plan is to drive all throughout the land, to all the big construction sites, and show you what they're planning on building with their initial budget of $500 billion, which has since ballooned to an estimated $1.5 trillion. And you're about to see why.
I'm to the coast, and I'm looking at a beautiful white sea. Very
Oxagon is planned to be the futuristic industrial city. Half of it built on the water. It'll be a place where shipping can connect the world to a bunch of high-tech manufacturing, research, and logistics. And then there's Sindala, which is right here in the Red Sea. It's going to be a luxury resort island with plenty of parking for yachts. We picked up a hitchhiker who had been working on Sindala for years.
we're looking in
Name is Magna, which is actually the name of the village which has been driving the but is no longer a village. They forcibly relocated thousands of people to the project.
Atop the ruins of these villages, the kingdom is building 12 luxury coastal resorts and communities. Hey, just one quick clarification here. All of those visuals are 3D renders. They are visualizations done by Neom to see what they want this to look like. This stuff doesn't exist yet, and I think that maybe it's obvious, but it looks so real that
오마가
I just
가진
wanted to
보물따위
make crystal clear.
대단할 게 뭐
I'm sure a
있다.
lot of this stuff from the hypey promo visuals that have come out from Neom. So that's one thing. Also, check out some of this footage I got while I was on the phone. Me shooting from the drone. Suddenly, when I was planning my trip to Saudi Arabia, I got really interested in these things, but it had nothing to do with Neom. So I hopped on the phone with my new colleague, Christoph, and asked him to go down the deep dive rabbit hole why there's a bunch of green circles in the Saudi desert, and he did so, and I made an entire video about what that video is like right now on our channel. And before we get into the story of Neom, and I show you the Bedouin, and show you this video, which is a edit, I need to tell you about today's sponsors. Sponsors are how I'm
아까
able to do
오마들이
this,
말한
how we're able
보물
to spend
열쇠구나.
months and months and months constructing such a massive video. Today's sponsor is Rocket Money. Thank you, Rocket Money, for sponsoring this video. A while back, I discovered that I had been subscribed to a bunch of newspapers. I report on stories all around the world, and I often subscribe to newspapers in other countries to read their content while I'm
이젠
reporting on
네가
it. And then
형이니까
when I move
걱정
on, I
말고.
forget that I'm subscribed. And I'm quietly paying $4 a month or something to these newspaper subscriptions, and I've forgotten about them. Rocket Money is a tool that allows me to easily see all of these subscriptions at once and cancel them with just a few taps. Just read down the subscriptions, get a bunch of features, one of the features being billing negotiation. So a lot of people are paying too much for the internet, and everyone knows this, and so negotiate for you to try to realize it. Rocket Money is also a customized budget that shows you where your money is going at all times, and these features
저게
with their
오마들이
premium
지키고 있는
subscription. So thank you
우리
Rocket Money for
상징.
sponsoring today's video. There's a lot more to this video, and this is where it starts to get pretty juicy. So let's dive back into the story of Neome and the Bedouin of Satellite. Built on some pretty wild designs,
이렇게 된
ideas,
김에
and concepts,
열쇠를 모두 찾아볼까?
including
A vast subterranean digital community inside a mountain. Magna, the coast of Neome.
우선 호이들을 처리하자.
And then there's Berlin up here in the mountains. Yes, there are big mountains here. It's going to be a luxury tourist destination for adventure and wellness retreats, complete with an artificial lake and outdoor activities like mountain biking and skiing. Yes, I just said skiing. Up here in the mountains, it gets pretty cold in the winter and snow falls. Definitely not enough for skiing, but enough for them to make fake snow and make ski slopes. They're building a man-made lake. In fact, they're doing it right now. I'm looking up at the mountain and seeing the storm of smoke from the dynamite that they're using to do whatever they need to do to build an artificial lake. Oh, and by the way, that's the mountain where Moses talked to God and got the Ten Commandments like a few thousand years ago.
There is no freedom without.
It's going to be a futuristic city that stretches 170 kilometers and run on renewable energy and artificial intelligence. They want 10 million people to come live here, like a whole New York City of people inside of this line in the desert. Just the digging alone, the amount of earth that they're moving is jaw-dropping.
이 형제들은 모두 내가 처리했다.
The magnitude that they're building mountains out there and moving so much earth. We all sat around the fire, me listening while they laughed and joked in Arabic. And then began cooking yet another delicious meal. This time goat, cooked in goat milk with flatbread. Wow.
is awesome. Yeah. Wow.
네 형제들
I'm admittedly a little drowsy after sleeping a few nights after the war.
가가다. 엄마, 아들과 같이 싸울 거다.
Today, Stalin is introducing the model of his tribe. It'll be the polar opposite of They put on their traditional Saudi clothing, so it's not just surprising that he has no we arrived here in the patch of desert where a few princesses. The elder of this family warmly invites me in from coffee. So at this point, I'm just convincing it turns out that the only Westerners I've ever seen out here are the ones that listen to us. Now, it's very strange to see them showing up to learn about their culture, especially with a How long have you lived here?
없다. 내 보물.
To meet the end, extended members of this family.
This family's been here.
These people's lives depend on moving these animals through the desert in search for safe food. We've seen it with some more people who live out here, the just sense of peace and simplicity that they get, that they realize that the city could make a dream.
What do you like about here that makes you stay? So, when you go to the city, getting out. This is a better life. Okay. Yeah.
덩치가 작다고 만만하게 봤는데 큰일 날 뻔했네.
As the group faces east to perform their fourth of 5 prayers they do each day, I'm looking west.
이게 뭐지? 설마
Just over those mountains, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is digging a giant line in the sea.
정령들의 기운이 많.
Working day and night to reshape this desert, building their high-tech eco-city.
Join the McDonald's Kitty Crew Workshop Bootcamp Edition. Register at a participating McDonald's store now.
정말 아슬아슬한 절벽이구나.
For most of its history, this was the way of life out here on this peninsula. And it may have
여기야,
remained
여기.
such to this day.
조심해서 와.
But eventually the Bedouin on this peninsula united, and unbeknownst to anyone, was sitting atop a sea of black gold.
Oil in commercial quantities, averaging about 200,000 barrels a day. To handle this huge volume, the expanding program requires an increase of permanent personnel to a total of more than 15,000 Arabs.
Oil changed everything. The kingdom rapidly modernized.
여기 아래. 나 보이지? 날 믿고 힘껏 뛰어내려.
And improve the living standards of his people.
All while still maintaining a deep connection with Islamic law and the rules and norms of Bedouin life. And despite this rapid modernization, hundreds of thousands of people still maintain their nomadic lifestyle.
그리운 향기. 정령 마을이야. 이게 그냥 어때요?
글쎄, 난 믿을 수 없다.
그렇게 말하면
The
시끄러냐?
conversation goes into the night,
그만.
and I knew I had to ask
기업을
about
달성하기 위해 항상 이곳에 올 순 없으니 간단한 방법을 알려줄게. 여기 있는 건물들이 모두 오픈부터 선택한 건물의 간략한 정보, 상세 정보 버튼, 건물 1단계의 진입, 다음 단계로 성장한 건물 업그레이드, 건물을 자, 업그레이드 버튼을 눌러봐.
I got nervous looks and
위협
vague
달성.
answers.
좋아.
But one thing is for certain, that the Saudi government has been paying and compensating anyone who's been affected by these projects. Out of respect, I decide not to push it. It's not worth it. We're sitting around a huge platter of camel meat and fragrant rice.
So where I'm from, there's no camels. No camels. I've never seen a camel until yesterday.
The elder generously showing his hospitality by finding the juiciest chunks of camel meat and
저건
fat and
대사요?
passing them to me.
네가
And I'm
버티기
realizing that this
대사요
moment is a
찾고
glimpse
있었습니다.
into one of the oldest surviving cultures on Earth.
천판에 우대번 잘했네. 나를 좀 도와주게. 어서 따라오게.
The family invites
이
us
정도로
to sleep
문제
near
없겠지.
their tent.
빠르게 뚫자고.
I'm really feeling just how fast the change has come to this world. Where nomads whose movement and lifestyle
보냐.
back to the earliest civilizations, and who are now living stone's throw from the construction of a futuristic city that is opening on the next chapter of human civilization.
오빠들 따위에 발이 묶일 순 없지. 서둘러 가세요.
It feels like too much. Couldn't work to feel grown for this link to the past. The oil transformed, but soon a problem began to arise.
여유를 지도는 입구까지 게다가 두 개를 자 준비하게.
Reality that burning oil to run the world is turning the planet into a place that's not conducive for
바로
human
저
life.
성실에 사부님이 계시는 게 분명해.
The International International Energy Agency predicts that the world will hit peak oil demand in 2030, at which time demand will start to fall. Other predictions say it'll take longer, but everyone agrees that the future of this world is not oil.
Alright team, we're transitioning to flax, but tasks are still going to be on Bullfrog. Did nobody see a poppycock post? Make sure you try to on the fireplace. Then, ping me on SmackDown. Guys.
This is bad news for Saudi Arabia, a country that has nothing but oil.
Aramco, the state-owned oil company, second quarter profits are tumbling by more than a third from last year's record highs.
Oil transformed this desert kingdom into a modern, powerful country. And in order for them to retain that status, they're going to need to use the money from the oil to transform themselves into meal. Saudi Arabia wants to replace its oil economy with new industries, some of which they want to historically closed is now welcoming tourists for the first time. Hoping to attract the world. This is something neighboring Dubai has done successfully. But Saudi Arabia plans to do on that note, I was surprised at every person I met treated me with kindness and eagerness to show me their culture. But it's not just about tourism. NEOM is manufacturing, sustainability technology, sports, education, media, and even in the case to reinvent cities themselves. They also want to use all this oil money to stay on top of global energy. All of this hot sun is great for solar energy. And while driving around, I saw endless fields of wind turbines. And you can use this to make new forms of hydrogen energy that they can ship around the world. And the reason why all these promo videos look like a Hollywood movie is because they can't do this without investors from the outside world.
무대요. 무사히 찾아오셨군요. 생명놈들이 나가는 거 확인.
예, 대사님께서 바로 저쪽에 계십니다.
They need them to play here, raise children here, somehow have a life here. And most crucially, to invest in these projects. The line. So not unlike a startup, NEOM is pitching the world on this impossible sounding vision with the hopes that people will buy it, invest in it, and make some version of it a reality.
사부님, 괜찮으십니까?
Did you feel excited about now?
용의 신호를 찾는 데 우선일세. 서둘보다 먼저. 사부님, 사부님!
What is NEOM? Then they need tour guides. They have more than 30 tour guides.
우대영과 사부님을 모시고 이곳을 나가자.
It's a big business.
용식이를 찾아야 해. 우대영과 사부님.
So while Solomon is seeing the benefits of this project, the effects for others in this region are less certain. We're driving by some of the towns that have been demolished. The people forced to move to make way for the construction of NEOM. They were given money to rebuild their lives somewhere else. But some refused to leave, signing a petition to protest this forced eviction. One even posted to social media voicing his outrage.